Update. It's February 13th, 2024. The time is 10 a.m. I'm calling this meeting to order. In attendance are Commissioners Brooks, Matari, and Duncan. Are there changes to the agenda? Okay, hearing none. Public comment. Okay, hearing none. We'll go ahead with our first item, which is the Justice Center update from Turner, Townsend, Heery, and David Mendez.
Good morning, David Mendez with Turner and Townsend Heery, for the record. Just an update on where we stand with costs. The contractor is still working on the pricing for the upgrades that we talked about in the last couple of meetings. They expect to be able to present that to you next Tuesday. We've added one item to that list through discussions about the weather barrier and how that all works in the building. There's a term EIFS. I don't know that everybody knows what that means. That's exterior insulation finish system. So that's the outer piece of your building, and that system is sometimes subject to bird damage. So woodpeckers think it's wood and they go and peck at it. They were looking at increasing the size of the gauge of the wire to help mitigate that. The contractors have included a larger gauge of mesh as part of the bid process. That's what the manufacturer recommends. So that's already partially been taken care of. The next step up was pretty cost prohibitive. It was $150,000 for the building. So they've kind of made that decision that it's not really worth that. So I had them look into a couple of other options. It's called, believe it or not, it's called Beak Guard. It's it makes the stucco taste bad to woodpeckers. That's an option. And then Stucco Flex, which is a hardener, so it makes the surface harder for them to penetrate. So, they'll be exploring those two options. I had a request from the contractor as part of the contractor's contingency, to increase or to hire an outside engineer to look at whether their calculations on temporary support of the large wall that you see being constructed. They want to backfill a portion of that, but they want to make sure that the structure supports that they have installed are sufficient for that operation. That's out of sequence a little bit to help them get backfill against the building.
So David, is that part of like additional commissioning fee? Kind of that's.
No, we have two contingencies. We have a design contingency for 3% of the project value, and we have a contractor's contingency for 3% of the value. So that's included if you look at the top line of our budgets that we've gone through.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that. I just
okay.
wasn't sure if that was like, because I know they have a third party come in and do those inspections. So I wasn't sure if that was.
No, it's not part of the inspections. It's part of temporary construction facilities. So that's part of the contractor's contingency. They're doing something out of sequence, so that's part of the construction cost.
Okay.
The next item is I've been pre-warning you about CCD4, which is an update to the plans through whether it be agency review or coordination with other drawings. I've got the number from the contractor ready to sign. So that's a landscaping change that we talked about, a tree. There's no cost to that change. Structural steel is the only component of those changes that actually ended up being a cost. That's $8,900. I know we talked about $50,000 last week. Then the contractor's markup total that will be taken into, again, this is the design contingency, so there'll be CCD4 for $9,429. So I have that document. It's been reviewed by the design team. It's ready to be executed. So I'm not sure if I'm asking at this point because you haven't reviewed it, but I will want to authorize that change.
So you have authority up to 25,000. So I think that you're able to do that.
I am, but then I'm also required to report to you what I'm considering. So
sure.
I've looked at the change. The design team has looked at the change. It's a legitimate cost. So proceeding forward with that, and I'll sign off on that.
Okay, all right. Any questions or concerns on that cost?
Not on that cost, but I am kind of curious. I just want to make sure that whatever you're doing and recommending is not going to lead to what seems like a very small modification to the building, but it opens up the potential where, well, that supplier was late and now all of a sudden it's going to increase expenses in other places or something like that. Because I know we're talking about switching out some materials as well.
In the case of CCD4, that's not the case. That's a coordination between drawings and so there's a structural modification to the building.
Yeah.
And that has been reviewed by the contractor to all of their subcontractors. They've been notified what those changes are. These drawings are being incorporated into the plan. So it's a speak now or forever hold your peace kind of a situation. Okay.
Yeah, it's just change orders, anything that we change after the
Yeah.
fact, that's usually where you get nipped pretty hard on the expenses.
Yeah, and that's on the contractor. Certainly we need to ask those questions, but that's on the contractor to make sure that all their subs are coordinated.
Okay,
So.
thank you.
I have some concerns. I was going over the status update agenda. And I think we've moved from status update to a mini business meeting where we're approving things that should be in fact properly brought to the business meeting where we have time to prepare. And I'm in favor of this, but I'm not going to vote on it because
And you're not being asked to.
well, we are. It says action.
Yeah, that's for just in case, but not in
Well-
this case, but.
We do a lot of action, and it's not just in case. We go action, 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 and those items should be at the business meeting. This is a status update where we have something that we're updating the status on, and the three of us can talk about it or ask questions. And so anything that has action next to it, 1, 2, 4, and 6, is improper here.
Okay.
Your response?
My response is, depending on what it is, like the coroner request for grant funding, would be appropriate action today if the board decides that we're going to allow him to move forward in the process of the lab. Then he would bring the contract or any idea to spend money back to the business meeting. So we're not approving anything right there. The audit option for the fair is more like, yes, proceed in this direction. So technically, it also is not going to be a business meeting type thing.
I think it should be labeled discussion then.
Okay,
All those items, 1, 2, 4, and 6. And I'll be happy to discuss it, but I will not vote on it.
okay. David?
So the next item, it was brought up that we would have additional cost from the architect to update the drawings to reflect discussions about that exterior barrier that we were talking about. The architect has reviewed that and said that there will be no additional cost to update those drawings, so there's no cost involved. Another item that I want to put on your radar is the contractor, after walking and meeting with staff about the future at the end of the project where we will be tying into the existing building. There's a hallway that will be constructed. It's going to displace workers. That coordination, your staff ask questions about that, how this work would occur with their operation going on. And the contractor is, reviewed that, looked at what their schedule is going to be, and will probably have to come up with a plan for temporary relocation of about 6 workers that last 2 months of the project. So April and May of 2026, we'll have to come up with a plan to coordinate that.
2025.
I'm sorry, 2025.
Thank you.
2026 was another funding mechanism that we were talking about, so I confused that, sorry. And that's all I have for cost updates. Are there any questions about where we are with progress out there or anything like that?
Any questions?
Okay,
No, thank you.
I think you're doing a great job.
thank you.
All right, item 2, Kootenai North, and we've got a couple sub-items in here, electric bills, roof, and construction updates. Hi, turn your mic on. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, you guys wanted to be here.
What's that?
You guys wanted to be here.
Well, we don't want to be here, but we're gonna be here. I guess, what are your questions, ma'am? So I believe this was brought to this meeting by one of you all for discussion on certain things. So I guess my question is what is your questions on the 3 items?
Okay, I don't know how the electric bill got on there. I'm assuming I saw the roof quotes, so we need to talk about that, and then, of course, construction update, so,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, Corey.
Let's
you
start
wanna
with construction update. So we received bids last week. You got 4 bids. Stancraft was the low bid. I've done some evaluation based upon what I had estimated, about $585,000 for that portion of the work. Stancraft's bid is $538,000, so it's about $50,000 under where we're at. So I think my recommendation, I'll write you a letter that indicates I think we should proceed with Stancraft. The contracts have been drafted. They're at legal right now, being reviewed. The intent would be hopefully by next Tuesday, we could have it on your business meeting for approval for that. During the walkthroughs, and we discovered there's an issue with the fire alarm system. So Tom has got somebody coming out this Friday to take a look at it. At one point, they had integrated it into the security system, and we have to do some modifications to it. But we've got to figure out how it actually operates right now. So there's going to probably be some expense with a fire alarm system at some point in the future.
The infrastructure's there, it's just the panel isn't, the fire panel, so that's something that I'm dealing with on Friday, a contractor coming out.
All right, don't we typically do bid award, then we do contract, or we'll just do that all at the same time?
I think we do it all at the same time typically, yeah.
Okay. And the roof. So.
I'm gonna defer to Tom on the roof.
So far, we've only had one contractor respond, I'm still waiting for 2 more. They wanted to wait till the snow melted and the weather was a little better to get up there. But the initial one we got was basically for overlay for the entire building that has the issues is about 189 grand. And then if we wanted to do complete tear outs, it escalates from there. But, the warehouse section, which is the 380,000, doesn't need to be done. They just included that in if we wanted to do everything at the same time,
Okay.
so.
And then depending on what the other 2 bids come back at is where we're gonna have to put it out to bid or not, potentially. Okay. Okay, any questions on the roof?
Yeah, what is ACM? It's in the bid. It is assumed that there is no ACM present.
ACM is asbestos containing material.
Okay. All right. And how long is this roof supposed to last?
Once they install it, 25 years.
No, I'm talking about the one that's on there. How old is that roof?
90s, I believe.
It
So-
kind of depends on which portion of the building you're
Right.
on. It's not,
Yeah.
it's on, all been re-roofed
Oh,
at
I'm
the
sorry.
same time.
So is it basically at the end of its life?
The portion over the admin building is, yes.
And what about the portion over the warehouse?
I think that's the newer expansion, isn't it? I don't have the details on when each section was built
Yeah.
and add on.
And did we ever perform a inspection on this building before we bought it, so we understood what we were getting ourselves into?
That was my question. I don't think there was.
Did we perform
I don't remember, I'd have to ask
People
Greg.
actually went over there and inspected.
like a professional
No,
inspector?
I don't think we did. And if we didn't, which we may not have, it's my fault and the rest of the board that was on board at that time. We should have done that.
I mean, we get this building, we give it away for 3 years, we take possession of it, we have a new roof we are looking at putting on. I'm just surprised that we are getting hit with this stuff, the fire alarm system, things like that. We should be knowing about this. It's only, what, a $5 million purchase? It's not my money. It's not our money. But we are the caretakers of it. So we should be doing everything we can to make sure that the right people are looking at things, to make sure we don't have these unexpected expenses. My only concern with the roof is the fact that, are we just going to do a patchwork job and then, push this expense off later? Or is the roof on both buildings hit their end of life cycle and we should be doing this proactively before people are actually in there? And without answers to those kind of questions, it's very hard to figure out which direction to go into.
The overlay that's recommended here is basically putting a new roof over the existing. So that would be the 25-year warranty. The warehouse, according to this contractor, is in excellent shape. So I think we could probably kick that can down the road.
Well, it'd probably be worth at least knowing where the life expectancy is
Okay.
with it, so we can understand how far we're kicking the can down the road.
Right.
In fact, we may not even be kicking a can. We may be doing something unnecessarily because it's only 15 years old and it has a 30-year lifespan. I mean, we're making these decisions for the Justice Center expansion right now on roof. We looked at that. And, so it's always a cost benefit in the end. Whether it makes sense to do this now or later, if we're 2 or 3 years away from the end of the, life of that roof.
Right.
And then what's the difference between just overlaying and ripping out? Is there any benefit?
Not necessarily, you would know more than that, but yeah, generally.
Typically, the building code says you can only have 2 roofs on a building. So right now, there's 1 TPO with a coating on top of it. They don't count the coating as a roof layer. So you can put 1 more roof layer over the top of it. But in 25 years or whenever that roof fails again, you would have to do a complete tear off.
And
There's sometimes where you have a bunch of roof leaks, you may want to get in there and take the water-soaked insulation out. That 1 corner probably should be done, even if they do an overlay. So,
and that's something that we don't know yet until they get into it.
right, there's that 1 corner that was leaking really bad that I would recommend taking out at least maybe a 10 by 10 area of insulation, which would be pretty inexpensive to do.
Do you think that leak has been going on for a while?
It has been.
Yeah, because the tenant, the previous tenant. And just out of curiosity, if you put another roof on top of a roof, how much more does that increase the expense when it comes to removing the roof later?
With a TPO roof, not a whole lot. It's because it's just a thin membrane,
Okay,
so it's pretty easy to take it off.
okay. Just curious, that's all. So,
Okay. So then once the other bids come back, then we can have the discussion on which way we want to go. And if you would get the age of the warehouse roof by then, that would help us in that decision.
Something else that this board, I think, should maybe consider, and that is hiring someone to go through this building, unless the professionals think otherwise, to make sure there's no other surprises in there.
There is some electrical issues. we
Okay,
discovered.
well,
Yeah.
I think this might be the time for us to actually spend money and do this the right way before we have to spend a lot more after we've put folks inside there. So,
Is that the direction you would like us to go? Because
Well,
like Tom is alluding to, we are finding, it's an older building, and we are finding in any remodel, you're gonna find different things. The fire alarm system wasn't something we anticipated, and some of the electrical things that we've had to address along the way weren't anticipated. So, instead of having to come back onesie twosie back to you every time, it wouldn't hurt to have a robust inspection of the building.
well,
So, Tom, didn't you and Greg do that with Mike?
I wasn't involved in this building at all when it was purchased, so.
Right, but I mean, since they moved out.
Just what I've been dealing with
Okay.
is stumbling across, moving furniture and then flipping on lights. There's a major neutral issue in that building that I've.
A major what?
A neutral issue.
What is that, a neutral?
It's the part of the electric, it's, for some reason, it's fusing, in some of the switches, so you're getting a little shock back on some of the switches. So I've got an electrician that's gonna go through the building, but
It's a fairly evident
something.
fault then.
Yeah, it depends on how serious it is.
Yeah.
So if the electrician's going through there, are we doing double the work by hiring commercial inspector to go through?
He's fixing things as he finds it. And then I wanted to, once we get into the building, I wanted to hire somebody to go through and see what exactly was the issue, and then let us know what that is, and then we can address it then.
I would propose that we actually pay to have this building inspected now, and the main reason for it is not because I want to incur additional expense, far from it. But as we hire contractors to give us bids to do work on this building, and we don't know what is involved in this building beforehand, we're going to be bidding for the wrong thing, and then when we discover it, we're going to be paying a heck of a lot more to fix it. And so I would argue that if not early, then let's do it late and get the inspection and figure out what is wrong with this building, if there is anything else, so we can scope it out and then get it fixed.
Commissioner Matari, I just want to note that I did make the request to Kootenai County Grounds and Maintenance to inspect the building prior to us taking control of it. And Greg did go up there and do whatever, I don't know what he did, but he did an inspection. So we did a good faith request. We would like this building checked before the sheriff's office takes, not ownership of it, but we start moving into it. And that was done, so.
I don't think,
Greg's not here to speak for himself, and I'm not gonna speak for
I
him.
don't think Greg is a qualified,
I'm not
building
saying that he is or
inspector.
is not, I'm just saying that we made the request that
Okay.
that the building be inspected before we took possession of it.
Yeah, well, I think we need someone to inspect what's going on underneath that part of the roof where it's leaking, because this quote doesn't include.
That was
it.
noted that day, during that inspection, that leak was noted with Greg.
Was the leak noted or was the damage noted? Because
Well-
the leak, I don't think we need a specialist to tell us
We,
there's a
we
leak.
assumed there was damage based on the leak. if
Yeah,
that
but
makes
we need to
sense.
have a
Yeah.
sense as to
And
what's.
that's what prompted these quotes for the contractor to get on the roof, check that area of the roof
Yeah.
to determine if there was something that needed to be fixed.
I mean, how long do you think it would take for us to get a professional, and how much, well, I wouldn't expect you to know how much it would cost to go through that building, spend a few days, which I assume it would be at least a multi-day
Probably.
inspection, to look at it and give us a report. I mean, us mere mortals do this when we buy a home, so we know what to expect beforehand. And I think it would be prudent to do that now.
You have direction?
Okay? We will seek out an inspector.
Okay.
Get you a quote on getting that building inspected.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then as far as the electrical bills, I have no idea. We already approved them, so I don't know why those are on the.
For it to be put on this agenda, so I don't know
Okay.
either, other than I can give you some data to kind of back up the cost.
Okay.
So I got the, Kootenai Electric doesn't necessarily pay their own bill, if that makes sense. They do, but they don't. They pay a wholesale way lower rate than we pay. But I could do an analysis based on kilowatt usage. So in January of this last year, the coldest month of the year so far, we used 112,000 kilowatts. Historically, last January, when they had the building, they used 114,000. So we were actually lower than their usage. If you go to December, the first month that we were in that building, we were at 57,000 kilowatts. And the previous year, they were at 126,000. So during a normal temperature month, we were less than half, but we weren't inside of the building either. So I understand, the bills have been higher than I think anybody anticipated as far as the electric bill, but the building is heated electrically as well. And so one of the things we're working on is getting a quote from Avista to bring natural gas into the building so that we can request converting some of the heating costs to natural gas and compensate for some of that. Additionally, Tom is working on converting the light fixtures to LED, which will also decrease the amount of wattage use, so.
Oh, is that a use profile you have there?
Say
Is that a
again, sir.
use profile?
A use profile?
Yeah,
This data here?
month by month?
Yes, sir, yes, it
Could
is.
we get a copy of that,
I
please?
can provide that to you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I would like that, because it sounds like there is some overhead with maintaining this building that may not have been accounted for.
Currently, it's all fluorescence, which is kind of shocking, no pun intended, being an electrical building, that they should have maintained that or switched out and upgraded the technology. So that's gonna substantially affect the bill once we swap those out as well, so.
Yeah.
Lowering our cost.
Yes.
Yeah, so as part of the remodels, we're changing all the lights in the detectives area and the evidence storage are all gonna be LED lights. That's part of the cost that we bid out.
How much difference does that generally make?
On the electric bill?
Yeah.
For the LED, it makes a huge,
On usage.
it makes a huge difference because lighting is one of the most expensive things in the building, so the LEDs are way lower. I can't tell you exactly what it would cost, but.
Not
or what you're
exactly,
gonna
but I
save,
mean, does it
but
go down 20%, 50%?
I,
I know when we did the jail, it was closer to almost 50%,
Okay,
so,
Yeah, but the jail doesn't use electric heat though, right?
no.
Yeah, it's the electric heat, I think, that's
yes.
gonna be driving a lot of that
Right, and there's
expense in the wintertime.
There's a gas line in Dakota Avenue and from Avista, and Kootenai Electric would not hook up to it just because they're electric utility, so.
All righty.
We should have that data for you in the next, probably 2 weeks, so we can look at what that would cost to convert.
Yeah, I'd like to see that sheet
Yeah,
you have there too, so, thank
You
you.
guys, would you like it now? I brought
Yeah.
3 copies.
Thank you.
Green is our data, and the yellow is.
Thank you very
historical
much.
data from the electric.
Okay, anything else on Kootenai North? All right, number 3, Airport Temporary Control Tower Project Update. Gaston?
Good morning, Commissioners. I wanted to bring this to the board this morning just as kind of an update on a project that we've had in the planning stage for the last few months here. Just a little bit of background. As everyone's aware, the air traffic levels at the airport are extremely high. During our peak months, we have about 6 months out of the year where we see 4 times the traffic that we would during the winter time. So summer, spring, fall is pretty busy at the airport. Average op days around 400 to 600 operations a day. We saw peak days last summer at over 750 operations. So for all intents and purposes, we many days throughout the summer surpass Spokane International, and on our busiest days, we actually see the same level of traffic that even Miami International sees with 4 runways. So we have a lot of traffic out there. Something we definitely need to address. The only way to bring a higher level of safety to the airport and to the community is to start to go down the road of putting in a tower at the airport. There's definitely a lot of questions that come up with the tower. One of the biggest questions I get asked is, does a tower bring more traffic to the airport? Are we going to start attracting more traffic? And that is not the case at all. You have to compare an air traffic control tower to a street light. So imagine us being at Apple Way and 95 at that intersection with no control whatsoever. No stoplights, no stop signs. That is where Coeur d'Alene is right now. That level of traffic trying to figure it out, essentially. So the control tower sequences traffic similar to the way a stoplight sequences traffic in an intersection. That's exactly I mean, that's the most simple way to put it. So what it can also bring is the ability for us to reduce noise over the communities by creating different arrival and departure corridors where they come and go. So we can stop overflight in some of these places that don't necessarily need to be flown over as people are approaching the airport. So there's a lot of issues that it can solve, and more than anything, it increases the safety at the airport. That is the biggest thing right now. We are well over 4 times the allowable limit where the FAA starts to look at putting a tower in an airport.
And what is that? Tell me.
We're right about 150 ops a day is where the
And what is the FAA? Where are they? What's their?
their threshold is 150 ops per day is where the FAA says we need a tower at an airport. And right now we're at 400 to 600 ops a day. 400 to 600 operations per day.
Okay, so
We're well over the threshold of where the FAA would right now more than justify putting a tower in, essentially. So typically, airports look and rely on the FAA to build a tower, but essentially that process, it takes 8 to 10 years with the FAA to do that. If we started that process today, which I'm going to start that process in the next week, is entering us into the FAA's contract tower program. But it's an 18-month study for them to study our traffic. Then they determine, yes, you need a tower. Then it's another 24-month study to determine where are we going to put the tower. And then it's another 24-month study to do the environmental on the tower. And so it's, in our current climate, we are absolutely looking at the 10-year mark, if not further than that, due to funding with the AIP program within the FAA. So we're definitely going to do that process in the background, but we have an immediate issue today with our traffic. So I kind of took a step back and was just looking to see what can we do to provide a higher level of safety to our users in our community. Over the last few years, we have had the Forest Service provide a fire tower at the airport for 30 to 60 days during our peak fire season. That's an expense that the Forest Service would cover for us, and there would be a trailer there, essentially a fifth wheel with windows in it, and we'd have controllers there, and we would be under tower control for a very short period of time. It works very well. That's the safest 2 months that the airport functions for sure. So in talking last year with the contract company, normally it's private companies that do this, in talking with them, we were just thinking, how can we expand this business model, essentially? And we basically came up with the ability to put in a temporary tower structure at the airport that we can staff with contract personnel while we're going through the FAA process for the next 10 years in this. We're able to basically keep it a much stripped down and simple version of a control tower. They have all the, basically with technology changes and air traffic control, all the traffic radars and everything now are all web-based. They can operate on laptops and tablets with simple base station radios rather than having full radar scopes and everything you would see at a typical control center.
It's just pretty much staffed 24 hours a day.
We would actually look to just 10 hours a day during daylight hours, essentially 8 o'clock to 6 o'clock in the afternoon. We would have the ability to expand services during fire season. So if they were running bombers until late in the day, they would have the option to be in there. So essentially, we started looking at it. For 30 to 60 days at a fire tower, the trailer works fine. You know, you're at ground level. You can't really see up and over on the whole airport like you typically would out of a normal control tower. So there's definitely limitations. Radio communications, their antennas don't like to bend around the hangars and everything like that. So having the elevation helps. So I started looking at it like, well, can we build a structure for you that you can operate out of, a cab, and that would better serve you guys and be able to provide normal ATC services? And they said, absolutely. So I started to really dig into the nuts and bolts on what do we pay them if they bring their trailer up. Their trailer alone, not counting their services, costs us roughly $22,000 a month. So project that for a 6-month period over the next 5, 10, 15 years, we can, for pennies on the dollar, build a very simple temporary structure that would save us a lot of money. So what we're proposing is actually, I've been working with a company that builds modular observation towers for military bases. It's a company called Panel Built. They essentially would build the 360 tower cab and ship that to us ready to set on any kind of base. So you literally tear the plastic off, it has air conditioning, you open a door, you walk in, it has tables, it has the radios, it has everything. Something like that runs right in the neighborhood of $68,000 for a tower cab that's ready to go. So we started looking at, well, how do we build a base for this, everything else? And one of the cheapest and easiest modular systems is using shipping containers. So we're actually looking at building a structure that's stacking 3 shipping containers high and then topping it with this tower cab on top. So essentially, and we can do all this in-house. We have the equipment, we have the personnel to be able to generate this in-house. We're essentially buying a cab and buying Connex boxes for the airport, which would also provide additional storage as well. So based on our numbers right now, we're looking at approximately $250,000 to be able to build a tower at the airport. The airport has more than enough fund balance to be able to cover this. This is probably one of the single expenses that would bring the highest level of safety to our airport and move us in the right direction. So I more than anything wanted to get it in front of you guys. If you had any questions on the direction, anything you guys have heard that you want to relay to the airport, any questions on the contractors themselves, how we're looking at this. I can kind of go into detail on, we've already started to essentially go out for, quotes on what these private contractors would charge to staff the tower. Go ahead.
Could you put together a budget?
Absolutely.
Very preliminary.
Very, yep.
Okay, good.
Yep. I have everything. All the numbers would be very easy to put it all together. You can clearly see
Sounds good.
what it looks like, but yeah.
Who else uses one of these type of building?
So there's one of the closest, probably closest to our size of airport traffic levels would be Truckee, California. The only difference was they had a company, the same contractor that operated it for the first 2 years came in and built the tower as well. I actually spoke to that contractor as one of the people that would potentially bid on staffing our tower, and they said that it took a lot of essentially they went in and built a full ATC tower with consoles and everything, like the radar consoles. They put a radar station in. Looking back on it, they said we would do it exactly like you're looking to do it. This is with ADS-B and all of our new technology. They're like, there's no reason it has to be as complicated. We would do it very simply, essentially. Just build. It's more or less having an elevated cab with the right radios, with a very simple data link. So as far as location on this, I guess I should kind of touch on that. We're looking to place this right next to our fire station at the airport, just north of the Compass Rose. We actually already have utilities that are existing underground that come from the fire station over to this that would power this, and it would be on backup generation from the fire station. So data, internet, everything would be plumbed directly into this building. It'd be pretty turnkey.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Questions?
Yes. Yes. I think what you're doing is great to address the safety issue. But I definitely would like to see what the initial cost is, which sounds very reasonable, but also how that would affect the overhead of the airport. And then could the fees be recalculated to incorporate that additional expense?
Absolutely.
So it would be net neutral in essence.
Correct, yeah, we actually, so just so everyone has an idea, these services for a contractor for 3 controllers to be in there 7 days a week, 10 hours a day is roughly $140,000 a month is what that contract looks like. That's a significantly reduced rate to when they bring their trailer or what they would charge the Forest Service themselves. So I've already had discussions with the Forest Service. They are looking to enter into a ATC lease contract essentially with the county to cover most of these expenses. They're out of our 6 months, the Forest Service is looking to cover upwards of 4 months of that. So it would be up to the airport to have 1 to 2 months of coverage on that. And those, just like you said, can be very simply made up by, it's very common to have an ATC fee on our landing fees. And I wouldn't even want that assessed on this. We would essentially use the same cutoff we do now, where it's the 10,000 pound and above and non-based aircraft. So it wouldn't even be our local pilots that would be paying for that. It'd be all the visitors coming in that would have that $10 or $15 ATZ fee. And it would close that delta pretty quickly. And in all reality, for an airport our size, with as much traffic as we have and as big as we've grown, I would be able to easily increase our budget to cover that difference as it is now during next year's budget. I mean, that's a normal operational cost. To be able to bring that level of safety for that dollar amount is pretty unheard of for airports.
Sure.
So, yeah, we're very healthy in that respect.
Well, I say continue and put together a nice budget for us so we can
Yep.
look at it and see how the numbers, play out.
Absolutely.
And you'll have to do an RFP because it's over 200,000 for the project.
Correct.
Yeah. So does Ardura normally help write those? Does
Say-
Ardura help write the
Yes,
RFPs?
correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Good job, Gaston.
Thank you.
Yep,
Appreciate it.
thank you.
All right. Coroner request for grant-funded autopsy lab. Dr. Duke.
Thank you very much. If I may just give a little bit of a review as to how we got to this position. When I entered office, I had no intention whatsoever of going for creating an autopsy center, but what's transpired in this last year has been somewhat beyond our control, which has been the incentive for it. And the first mention for it is, I think you all know, came from Stan Mortensen, prosecutor, based on some issues that they had which increased their financial demands. And then we were just notified just a couple of months ago, as I noted in the last slide presentation, that we're being capped this year to 53 autopsies in Spokane because they are overwhelmed and overloaded. And at the rate nationally, most coroners send 30% of their cases that they receive for autopsy. We have such an experienced staff, we only send 12%, and they're asking us now to go down to 9%, and with our anticipated growth, it's more like 7 to 8%, which is going to reach a point where it'll inhibit our ability to adequately perform appropriate, prosecutions. That's where Stan was involved in this whole situation. So in the presentation last week, I was requested to put together a pro forma, and I appreciate that, Bruce, because, more information is always better, and so I was able to garner some additional information that I think will be educational for all of us. It was for me. There was concern that if what would we be able to do that Spokane County isn't currently able to do, and that's to bring in another medical examiner. There's shortages all over the nation, and that's well known. It's a well-known fact. And so I just wanted to give you the recruitment status of the ones in the area. Now, as far as who does autopsies, to give you some idea of it, there are exceedingly few in the Pacific Northwest. We have Seattle, we have Spokane, Ada, and Missoula. So in other words, all of the counties in that whole region are very, very restricted as to where we can send for autopsies, which is important for the justice system, obviously, of our nation. Ada, last week I had the opportunity to tour their facility. Absolutely beautiful, state-of-the-art facility. They're recruiting medical examiner for $345,000 a year. All benefits, compensation, everything. Their patient load for that medical examiner would be about 200 cases a year. Bannock, they're currently building their facility. They're advertising for $300,000 a year. benefits, assisted relocation, $110,000 loan reimbursement after working for 5 years, et cetera, and they advertised that the patient load would be less than $150 a year. Spokane County, their facility was new in 2020, and they're advertising for $242,000 a year. And I think that maybe by this just slide alone would give some self-evidence as to why they haven't been able to fill that position. That's been open for a while. So our proposed medical examiner needs in Kootenai County, what we're proposing is to basically begin by opening up through 2 to 3 days twice a month. If we had some urgent cases that need to be done right away, we can send those to Spokane. We're offering to pay hotel transportation. We've been, and basically we've been in contact with some medical examiners in the past week. We've been in contact with 3 of them. And what they would say is, well, we want competitive salary and we want benefits. Well, most of them are all independent contractors, already have health insurance, malpractice, et cetera, but what they're asking for is, local Idaho licenses, memberships, conference opportunities, et cetera, which would end up being about $5,000 a year. And I was told that a competitive salary would be about $200,000 a year, depending on how it's structured. We've been told that by more than one medical examiner. And so depending upon, the way I budgeted this, by the way, Bruce, is I budgeted kind of like worst case scenario, okay? So that I'm not, that's how I've always done business. What's the worst? And then we can cut back from there, okay? And so I estimated that, for example, we brought in somebody twice a month, housed them locally. They live far away. They live in Florida. They live in Arizona. They live in New York, or et cetera, et cetera. Estimating just their travel would be $24,000 a year. And the additional costs of an autopsy, and I had some really incredibly good news and pleasant surprises in this past week. And that's why I'm so glad we went through this process, because the additional cost per autopsy for us that we don't currently incur is about $50, with the instruments that they use during the autopsy, et cetera. And actually, I didn't change that number of 135. It should be 165. That was one of the pleasant surprises that I had. We were estimating originally that we would have 135 cases at our facility, and it looks like it's going to be 165 from the day we'd opened. Which would add up to 8,400. So the 8,400 is correct. The 135 is, I didn't change that when I found the new information. And so what I also did was budgeted 8 and 9 as if it is worst case scenario, that we would need both an autopsy assistant and a forensic technician 1 to assist during autopsies. And I don't know, is there another line down there that I can't see? I'm sorry. I think I had a 10, didn't I?
I'm sorry, on item 7, additional cost per autopsy equals $50.
Right.
What can, I'm not able to follow you here.
Okay, I'm sorry. During an autopsy, what an autopsy assistant does is for each case, they use blades, they use PPE, but in other words, what it costs to do an autopsy as far as the supplies are concerned per autopsy. So if you multiply 50 by 165, it should be 165, not 135.
Okay,
That's where the 8,400
I'm with you now.
Got it.
Thanks.
And so then in worst case scenario, what I did is I budgeted for both an autopsy assistant and a forensic technician 1. The autopsy assistant actually stands next to the medical examiner and does, should I say, a significant or perhaps most or significant amount of the work, and does the pictures. And the forensic technician, they take the samples, the biopsy samples. They're trained in making sure that everything is done appropriately for court purposes. So that everything, and so what I did is I budgeted for both an autopsy assistant and a forensic technician 1, as if they were both full-time, worst case scenario. chances are, what an autopsy assistant can do is do everything that a forensic technician can do. It's basically just how you name it. And in addition, in starting off, there's a very significant chance, and I've already had contact down this pathway, that opening up, we wouldn't need someone full-time. There are people who work in other locations that they'd be able to come in part-time and be willing to do their services just to make additional income. So I put on there basically an additional 100,000 that we could probably pare down dramatically. I wouldn't be surprised if we could pare it down to, depending upon the part-time, et cetera, but, half that would be a very easy thing to estimate. Then, one of the pleasantries that I had was that I have been in contact in the last week with every coroner listed on this slide. And the only except Shoshone, but I've been in contact with him before. We have a good relationship. I'm 99% sure that they'd be willing to send their cases to us. I just can't. That's the only one I didn't verbally speak with, but I verbally spoke with everybody else. And and so these are the estimated autopsies this year, just based on our going rates. 2 years ago, we were at 56. Last year, we were at 66. We were actually going at a rate of 77 according to Spokane, so I'm just putting 78 on there. And I've only added, compared to what, Bonner, Boundary, Benawa had, I just added 1 or 2 to each of those cases from what they were in 23. Shoshone, I didn't change at all. I think they had a little bit of an exceptional year this year. Layton normally has 15, Nez Perce, right 15, I added 1 extra, et cetera, et cetera. The coroner of Lewis told me they budget for 2 to 3, and Clearwater, they said they budget for 8 to 10. So, I mean, I'm using very real numbers here, so that's 168. The typical cost of autopsies are $2,000 at Spokane. And when I mentioned we were willing to do this, there was, to my surprise, there was very strong, oh yes, we'd be very willing to do that. Plus, what I haven't put on here at all is if we have the appropriate lab equipment and x-ray that we get through grant, et cetera, there's income potential from lab and x-ray as well. So that's not even included. That's a potential positive here that's not even included in here. So the number of autopsies Kootenai sent to Spokane were 66. As I mentioned earlier, they're capping us at 53. And the total number of autopsies that North Idaho sent to Spokane was 125. And so originally what I said is we didn't need any additional staff, but what I've done is I've added 2 full-time people. I don't think we're going to need 2 full-time people, part-time as I mentioned. This is the average cost, so the potential income to the Kootenai County Medical Examiner Facility once completed would be $338,000 that would be shifted that we're now paying to Spokane, or that other counties are paying to Spokane that would be coming to our facility. And in worst case scenario, I'm estimating that our cost would be $337, but it's well below 300, and I know that. Plus, what I also didn't incorporate into these numbers are that right now we pay transportation costs, and other counties pay transportation costs to get their cases into Spokane. That the number wouldn't be as high from our lab, but that's hard to estimate. So I just left it and didn't even include it in the estimate. And then the other potential income is mentioned. So to give you an idea, there's the Paul Coverdale Forensic Grant is the most ideal fit grant for us, and it's coming up very, very soon. They posted on March 30th. The closing date is May 31st. And these are just typical grants that they gave out last year. They give out about 15 or 20 grants. And it's because there is such a shortage in the nation. The average grant there was basically $350,000. And what you can use the grant money for are facilities, renovation, directly impacting improvements. We can use it for salary, lab equipment, supplies, et cetera. So what I did, and we have 3 years to spend the money. So then, as mentioned last week, ideally, we're in the light blue position right now at basically roughly 1/8 of the building, but these are some of the changes that are proposed to make. Would be to have an autopsy lab right next to our current location, which would be refrigeration. And then I learned this basically from Ada, that the highly decomped bodies need their own autopsy room because it is very, very difficult from an odoriferous standpoint. And we would make the changes in the building and HVAC, et cetera. And then we need drive-through garage, not only in the winter, but also for privacy because we have high-profile people here. So what I did is then went out and then estimated the costs of the equipment. I literally, these come directly from the company who does the equipment for medical examiner facilities around the nation. And this is their exact costs. And so what I did was estimate 2 autopsy beds in the normal autopsy room, and then 1 in the one in the decomp room. But I could get by with 1 in the decomp room, 1 in the regular room for a while. So these numbers I could decrease, I think it was 38,000 that I could decrease these numbers if I just bought 1 bed instead of 3. But this is all that is necessary from an equipment standpoint. This money would come from the grant. That's what the grant money would be used for. And so at worst case scenario, 117,000. So, so to fill in these numbers, Bruce, with the pro forma that you gave me, and thank you for doing so, our existing overhead is just based on basically our B budget. I kind of thought that was the best way to communicate it. And then what I did was what would be our additional B budget, and then the salary increases, worst case scenario, per month. And then the revenue from our cases and revenue from outside cases. And so based on those numbers that I just gave you, our existing overhead in the B budget is $28,000 a month. But I'm in worst case scenario, I'm expanding that to 5.3 a month. Now the utilities, as the time I made the slide, I didn't have the utility information. I wanted to include that. But really, I wrote T on there for transferring because right now, the sheriff's department is paying for, those utilities, and it would be a transferring it to our department. And I'm sorry I don't have that number. I got them late last night, so I would be able to give those to you if you need those. In worst case scenario, the new salaries are adding all 3 people. So this is $25,000 a month. But again, I think it's much closer to basically 18 to 20 by knocking down, because the 3rd person isn't needed and the 2nd person can be part-time to begin with. But the revenue numbers are quite good. These are the numbers of cases that we're going to have, and that's normally what we would be paying to Spokane that would be converted to us. The outside numbers are quite solid. And then the associated income that would be coming to us, and that's where I got those numbers earlier. So in worst case scenario, we come very close to breaking even. But there's several places where a lot of money can be saved just by the number of personnel and the number of beds that are ordered. So now that we are nationally accredited, one of 46 roughly out of 2,000 in the nation, that makes us very, very competitive nationally. In the industry, it's considered a prestigious award. And there are only 6 in the nation that are duo accredited. And if I wanted to, we could, go down that pathway of applying for the 2nd accreditation as well, because the requirements for one are very, very similar to the accredits of the other. But to me, it's almost a redundant scenario, and I don't feel like that's absolutely necessary. We're kind of proving who we are. But it would do is it'd keep the autopsy money regionally in the state of Idaho, and then the additional lab fees. So my request is basically, I've looked at some of the grants for those that have been in the Coverdale Award, and they're beautifully written. I mean, these people know what they're doing to be competitive. And so we become incredibly competitive just because the grant's coming from an accredited coroner office. But we could enhance that tremendously by people who know how to do that. So my request would be to have a grant writer who either has worked on these grants or something similar with experience, and then the money that is necessary for an architect to at least, which I don't think would be dramatic, I don't need finished plans, but at least enough so that I could provide the infrastructure costs during the grant application process, so that they know what I would need in order to change our current building to be able to do the things that we're looking at, and then we can adjust accordingly. And then what I plan on doing is I'm more than happy to do town halls to notify the citizens of the county why I'm going in this direction. Again, it wasn't something that was part of my plans for the office and coming in, but I think the need has arisen, and I don't think that we should be limited in what we do when we're already showing that we are on top in the nation, and then we're being told, okay, we're going to cut you back 25% just because. They've taken something very critical out of our hands, which I don't think is benefiting the citizens of Kootenai County, and I'd be more than happy at town halls to make my case to the public. Do you have any questions concerning the information?
Bill?
Well, I think this is the kind of thing that the public really doesn't understand at this point. Because if you say, we need to spend so many $100,000 to do this, they're gonna go, why? So I think the idea of publicity, whether it's town hall or articles in the paper or whatever,
Sure.
very necessary
Yeah.
to bring people up to speed.
You bet. You bet. It's a topic that nobody likes to talk about, and I get it.
Yeah, but we've had, as you know, direct need for an autopsy lab, but we've had so few absolute people, we could ship them off to Spokane. But as we grow, this is not Mayberry anymore.
You bet. And it's not going to get less. The need's not going to get less with each year that passes.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly.
I just want to confirm that the build-outs are not included in your $117,000.
That is correct. That is just simply the supplies.
Okay, so you need to work with an architect to determine the cost of the build-outs.
Exactly.
And then you want, so money for that, and then money to apply for the grant after you know what the build-outs are gonna cost.
Correct. With ideally a professional, grant writer, which is not part of the budget that I could foresee last year, but exactly.
So how much would you be looking at for each of those items?
I'm already familiar with the architect locally who has worked with the building and knows the building well, and I also know the architect company that did the work at Ada. So I think the two of them in collaboration, it's not as if we need finished architectural plans, which normally cost thousands. I would estimate that for their time to put together something that would be equivalent for a grant would only, I imagine, again, I don't do this on a regular basis, but I would imagine they'd be willing to do it for a couple of thousand or something equivalent.
Yeah, I would say just go get the quotes and bring that to us. I mean, because that's in essence what you're asking for.
Right.
But I do think we need to tighten up the numbers a little bit,
Okay.
because I'm not sure, are your salary numbers loaded or are they not loaded?
No, as a matter of fact, what I did is I actually have pulled them off the internet of currently active positions that are opening as far as those are concerned. And that's why I did a forensic, an autopsy assistant and a forensic technician one. I added them both to the budget. And so the annual salary is 46 to 64. And so that's why I went with 55. and basically the other is real equivalent. They talk hours per dollars, which is about 50,000. But in essence, that's a full operating lab that needs both of them at the same time, because we're running through so many specimens that the one who's assisting the autopsy doesn't have time to be able to actually process everything and put it on microscopic slides and perfectly label them, et cetera.
Yeah.
But now that's talking an incredibly busy autopsy center, so that's why I did worst case scenario.
No, I was just,
An autopsy assistant, one, can do both, and if they're only doing, roughly, 165 divided by 12, so they'd only be doing about 6 or 12 a
I was
month.
referring to like the FICA, the health insurance, all the benefits, the load that goes on top
Sure.
of the salary.
Sure.
Because that's a
No.
cost to the county. That's what I'm referring to.
Oh, absolutely. No, I'd be happy to talk with HR on that as well.
Yeah,
You bet.
because the way I kind of see it working out here is our architect would put together an estimate for the build-out, and you would get an estimate for the grant application. And the final moment when the board has to decide whether or not we want to proceed is if we get approval on the grant. Would that be correct?
Yeah, you're correct, exactly. So, I mean, in other words, the desire is to not move forward no matter what. All of those finances have to be looked at. But my gut feeling is if we don't move forward and we're limited by 53 next year, the year after,
I understand
the year after,
that. What I'm getting at is that if we're going to make a financial decision, we should have all the information in front of us that we possibly can get, so we
Absolutely.
don't say yes to something
Absolutely.
and then discover a year later, oh, we didn't anticipate these things. Because that's
Absolutely.
bad planning, that's bad business.
Absolutely, no, and that's why I get that. There's no way that, because the grant could be 350,000 or it could be 500,000, and that makes a huge difference as to the decision-making process, absolutely.
So, okay, well, that makes sense to me. So you've convinced me that if you can get a quote for those two items, the architectural fees and the fee to pay a grant writer,
Okay.
You have my support.
Okay, great, thanks, Bruce.
And then scheduling town halls and stuff like that, then yes, I would agree to just take the first step.
Sure, all righty,
Bill?
Good job.
thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Brandy, would it be helpful to handle item 6 before, since we're running late and the fair is here?
Yes.
Okay, all right, so item 6 is the audit contract options for the fair. Brandy.
Brandy Falcon for the record. So I emailed the board, I believe, yesterday or
Last
the
night.
audit contract options for the fair. So just as some background, as a result of the county's FY23 independent audit, we all arrived at the decision, the fair and the commissioners and legal, that the fair would change their fiscal year to align with ours, and that as a result, to facilitate the timely issuance of our financials every year, they would also have the same auditor as us, so that everything is getting done on the same schedule and we're not behind. So Eide Bailey is our current independent auditor, and they provided a letter with 3 different quotes of approximately what it would cost to add the fair. To give some context, the fair's previous auditors were about $10,000 a year. So I spoke with Alexia multiple times on all 3 of these options, and she said that the fair favored quote 3. That would be a full independent audit of the fair with their own separately issued financial statements as well. She said that their board was willing to pay for the cost of that contract from their own funds and not from property tax. They also wanted to have their own engagement letter with Eide Bailey, separate from Kootenai County's engagement with Eide Bailey, which my office, we double checked that if the fair were to get a finding, would that be a finding on the auditor's office? And Eide Bailey said, no, it would not, because they're being audited separately. They have their own internal controls. So our office, the auditor's office, is comfortable with option 3, and that's what the fair prefers. I'm just putting it here for your direction, if the fair were to proceed with their own engagement letter with Ide Bailey, it would not come before you. That would be a contract between the fair board and Ide Bailey. So any questions?
The fair has been beat up pretty bad in the last 5 years with forensic audits, which were totally unnecessary. There was no criminality alleged, but they were torn apart and inspected, and nothing was found of any significance. And I just want to state that for the record, that they've been doing a very good job of taking care of their own finances. And they've been, and I think they are and will be, very cooperative with the county. So I'm in favor of what you outlined as 3. I think that would be a good place to go.
Okay.
Is there any conflict that you can think of with option or quote 3 that would, where two different, one entity or two different entities have an engagement letter, but ultimately I think we've determined that the county is responsible for the activities at the fair. Is that correct?
The Board of County Commissioners is responsible for the fair board, and the fair board,
Yeah.
my understanding, that our attorneys aren't here at the moment. The fair board is responsible for those decisions, so it's kind of a chain effect back to you. From a financial perspective, it's a little funky that they're on their own, but they're still under you in a way. My office is okay with them having a separate audit contract, because that means that my office doesn't have to write their financials for them. We just have to wait on their audit to be done, and then we get a bulk download of their numbers at the end of their audit to plug into our financials. So for my office, administratively, that works. And my concern of if they were to get a finding, it's not a finding on us, because it's a separate audit, separate administration. Those were my main concerns.
What about if there's a delay in you getting the audit? How does that
That's
affect
why we want to
operation?
have the same auditor, because Ide Bailey is willing to go out to the fair in the summertime and perform the bulk of their audit work in the summer, so that in the fall, they only have to audit 2 to 3 months of activity. And they also are working with us at the same time, and they know the deadline we are on for our financials, so they will get their audit done in time for us to meet our deadline. Because previously, the fair having a different auditor was holding us up. We weren't getting information in time.
Okay, so you're comfortable with the idea that you will get the information you need when you need it?
I'm comfortable with that. Hopefully people live up to what they're telling us. I mean, we're paying these people to meet deadlines. So if they don't meet deadlines, then they don't get paid,
Yeah,
So,
that's the only issue for me. I believe
Okay.
that we should do what, your office and the fair wants to do, with the understanding that there are deadlines and that
Right.
we shouldn't be held up from missing those deadlines.
I agree. And they're very real deadlines. If we don't meet issuing our financials, we don't get our revenues from the state, which are our largest non-property tax revenues. We miss out on our 3%. It's a really, really big deal. So if we were ever close to that, you would be hearing about it.
Okay.
So,
Okay, so it looks
So
like
direction?
direction is quote 3.
okay, thank you.
All right, item 5, present the FY24 quarterly financials. And I actually do have an off-site meeting at 11:30. So if we'll go ahead and get into it, and hopefully it
Okay.
won't be too long.
Well, first of all, the last time I did this, there was a citizen who wanted us to show them up on the screen. So I don't know if, Jonathan, you're able to go to our website and pull it up, just so they can see it. But I know that you should all have your hard copies in front of you. I have my hard copy. Last time I presented it, I just gave you all a brief overview of kind of the structure of the report and what's included in each section. I don't want to go through and just drone on and do something very boring that doesn't provide value for you. So I would like to know what would be of value for the board.
Are there any problem areas?
No major problem areas. If someone is over budget, we put a footnote and we explain it in the back. There's only one, that there's a department that'll probably have to come to you and ask for fund balance. That's the court clerks, they had a project with building and grounds that was in the B budget, so it didn't get rolled forward, and building and grounds apparently still had more work to do, so they're gonna have to come to you in the next couple of weeks for that, but I just wanna know specifically, is there anything that would be valuable for you guys to hear from us every quarter?
I like the problem.
Okay,
I mean, if you tell me, because we really trust you in your office, you've done a great job, but if you tell me there's no problems, I'm relying on that.
okay,
Bruce?
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, we already talked about this. Using a quarterly snapshot for an annual budget doesn't really tell the whole story, but it's probably at this point better than nothing, because unless we get budgets submitted by quarter,
Right.
we don't really know, because there's heavy expense seasons and then there's lower expense seasons. So
heavier revenue seasons and lower revenue
exactly.
seasons.
So
Right, so I'll just briefly say, pages 3 through 18, that's just line items of each department, and if anyone is over 32, at or above 32%, we've put a footnote, and if you go to the back on page 27, we've written an explanation for why they're above expenditures where we would expect this time of year. We did add a new page on page 26 to show you our largest categories of non-tax revenue. That's our revenue sharing, our sales tax, liquor, and interest, as well as our unrealized gain loss on investments, so that you can see as we go through the year where we're at. So you can see that there's no revenue sharing that's been recorded. The state is very behind right now because they've implemented a new financial system, so we are behind on getting our quarterly distributions from the state. So you'll see money in their next quarter. The only sales tax we received, that's the first quarterly payment of the sales tax for the public defender. We still, as of this quarter, had not received sales tax for the rest of the county. So this is just a page for you to see every quarter where we're at in those major revenue categories. So if there's any further questions or direction on what you'd like to see every quarter.
Oh, I'm happy with this, so I
Okay.
always go to the green page first when I
Yeah.
get my book, so.
Right. This is required by statute, and we post it online every quarter for everyone to look at, so.
All right, any other questions?
no, thank you.
All right, public comment.
I'd like to say something very quickly, unless there's someone else here. No. I don't want to get into any specifics here, but there was some information that I forwarded to another commissioner that was not included in the email. And I want to emphasize that I don't believe any of us up here should be denied any information whatsoever before we come up here. And so I think it's absolutely essential from a leadership perspective to ensure that all of us are operating off of the same information. And that's been my beef with some previous issues, was that I discovered that people had access to information that the rest of us didn't. And so I just only want to encourage and remind that we should develop systems so that all of us have the information we can possibly get at the earliest point in time, so we can discuss the same things. And I just think that's essential for a board to function properly. And that's all I had to say. And I thank you for entertaining that.
All right, no one online, Jonathan? Okay, 11:18, meeting adjourned.